I'm like not just learning about humans, but also how do we create the change
Hmm.
and like the habits and hangups
Hmm.
of all of us and and it's so massive, right? It's so massive. Um, but what I'm hearing you say is also you are learning to not make this your project.
Yeah.
It's a it's a communal learning. And even though you're doing the dissertation, the whole concept is you not doing the dissertation the way that the institution wanted you to do, but breaking free and using multiple perspectives,
Yes.
um, and validating the way they work, not to benefit, but to benefit us. And like, we could also do this too
Exactly.
and learn from it. And I'm saying it in a way where I'm like, duh, but also it's like, it is challenging the way we work right now
Yes. Yes. Absolutely. Hmm. Yeah.
in this linear read a book,
Yes.
intellectualize other people's cultures, and then
Yes. Yeah.
reproduce it for profit, making products. And
And it stays within the vein of the other branches, you will, that uphold the academic institutions. So it might go within medicine or science, and never really, it's never, that work is very hard for the people outside of the academy to access it, you know. And this is not what our hope is, that this is not what we're doing. We're constantly producing knowledge together outside of the institution. If anything, we're it is from that point of departure, the community, that we ask permission. Can we bring this into the academy and talk about it, you know, and uh, and learn from it? And that's a big shift. That's a very big shift in anthropology.
yeah, it's almost backwards because even before the academia, I mean, our ancestors, indigenous from wherever they are, they didn't have these institutions to teach them,
Yeah,
but they were very well, versed in
of course.
communication,
Yeah.
um, in interpersonal, in making things work with very little or a lot. Maybe not when I say very little in terms of Western judgment.
Mhm, mhm,
They had a lot, and these were just like naturally handed down
mhm,
based off necessity or whatever it was. But now we're relying so much on books and quotes and
mhm.
you know, um, and someone bringing the information and then us
Yeah.
soaking it in. So, what is the movement that you are involved in, if you don't mind sharing?
No, absolutely. And just before I go into that, just to bring it back to the assimilation process, or that you were talking about, the education system here is an assimilation body, if you will. A lot of uh, what we are taught in schools here in this country is to further assimilate you into the culture. And that includes academic institutions, the higher education, what we would consider higher education. So just wanted to
Hmm.
throw that in there. What I do, well, I basically did a lot of my work on queering motherhood and mothering. And it was my way, as I've been saying, of pushing back on who gets to be a mother and what a mother looks like, what mothering looks like, what motherhood looks like. So my work was rooted in communities that do not, or not afforded a space to share these types of expressions, if you will, and lived experiences. So it was the BIPOC LGBTQ community. One ethnography was centered in Miami, where I grew up, and the queer community there. And the other ethnography was centered in New York City with the House Ballroom community, which is an incredible, it's a performance circuit, and it's also um, an expression of a kinship family, a mother and their children that is not in line, if you will, with what a mainstream mother is, especially within these contexts that we're talking about, the United States and hetero patriarchy. Um, but yeah, so I basically write about queering these spaces, queering motherhood, and mothering. And I write it using the lens of queerness and also matriarchy. Matriarchy as a paradigm shift, right? A lot of people, speaking of anthropologists, uh, have really devoted their academic time, if you will, to saying that matriarchies never existed, or that they are no longer with us. And it's not true. You know, matriarchies did exist. Matriarchies have found a way to survive even within patriarchy. What I noticed too, as I was having these conversations of who gets to be mother and how we mother, and our mothering styles and motherhood and whatnot, is that a lot of us are actually practicing what our mothers and our grandmothers and our great grandmothers taught us. And then all of those, when you look, because they're BIPOC, when you look at their lineages, they are actual matriarchal formations. Like they come from matriarchal backgrounds. So I think also that idea of matriarchal practices and ways of surviving and thriving being passed down, in our DNA. And they are the tools that we use, the technology, if you will, that we use to be able to survive our current conditions. Mm. So that's basically what I do. I mean, on top of other things, and being an artist and developmental editor and all that stuff, creative consultant. That's mainly what I focus my work on. And also, I was able to take what I call motherhood phoenixing and create a framework that I like to use when I'm establishing relationships and just different spaces of encounters, if you will. So
What is this project of Motherhood Phoenix?
motherhood
Mothering.
phoenixing, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, a lot of it came from these conversations, being in conversations with these communities that I spoke to you about. But basically, it's just motherhood phoenixing is a way to push back on what a mother can be. And this might be like, oh, for a whole different podcast, but I'll keep it very, very surface. Um, I've always considered myself a mother, but I don't have children, and I don't want children. Um, but I have other ideas of children, and I do have children. My friends' children, my nephew's son, as I call him, my sister's child. My projects are my children. So again, pushing back on language, this is where the phoenixing comes from, because I believe that we need a lot more. We have a lot of nouns, but not necessarily a lot of verbs. So um, I turned the phoenix into a verb, just also for what it represents. A lot of us, especially if we're going to see the mother that I'm talking about in this way, we need to kind of like go up in flames, if you will. We need to really undo a lot of narratives and language that do not allow us to envision that possibility. And so basically motherhood phoenixing as a framework says that number one, we're all mothers, simultaneously mothers and midwives. So even in this moment, you're birthing something, or we're birthing something together, and there are moments where you hold me as a midwife as I birth and vice versa. So we're constantly playing this game of sustaining each other's humanity, sustaining each other's labor pain, sustaining whatever it is that we're birthing. So it's this coming into a space as understanding that the mother essence and then midwiving essence, right? Motherhood really says we all have wombs. Doesn't matter who you are, doesn't matter what gender, your identity, however it is, you come to this space understanding that you have a womb of creation. We all have the ability to create, whether it's stories, people, yes, our emotions, relationships, whatever it may be. So creating the space to hold that womb as it's gestating, how do you nurture it, and how does that, what are the elements needed, to make sure that that womb and the contents in it, if you will, are always kept safe and nurtured. And mothering is basically any practice that allows motherhood to emerge as a social practice. This is a social thing. You do this in community. Mothering the practices of mothering can be taking care of each other in a mutual aid type of way, making sure that when we come to consensus, it's an egalitarian formation. How do we engage in gift giving? How do we engage in, yeah, I mean, it's endless. I can go on and on and on of practices that are also very matriarchal, if you will, in essence. So those are the three key components that I try to bring into all of these encounters, and hopefully what I want out of that is for people to feel, almost like pregnant with hope, right? That you're not alone in this journey, that unlearning and learning can be painful. Like anything that we're birthing, there are labor pains that need to be held, and you don't have to hold them alone. There are ways to push through that. There are ways to breathe through that. There are ways to hold space for even that which wasn't able to be born at the moment, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I use that language because that's also a way for me to push back on the language that we use now, which is very patriarchal, militaristic, transactional.
I love that. It's so it's very inclusive, and it's spiritual without, focusing on the one way which everyone is supposed to see mother. And with respect. The word mothering is like with respect, going back to our mothers, right? And also to remind us that we are not in a matriarchal society, and that we also have to create one if we want one. And that's beautiful. I love the just the title, the meaning, all of it. It's
Well,
really beautiful.
thank you. I love that you said that. Thank you so much. And I just want to say that when you create, again, when you co-create something from a space of love, like what I lived in these communities, that I was able to co-create. I mean, I hope that all you can feel is what you said, because that's really, the words are just the vehicle for what I felt when I was
Yeah,
co-creating these moments, these thoughts, if you will.
I love it. Yeah, we definitely operate even as women through patriarchy. So to have, conversations about how we dismantle little bits and parts of our behavior and how we create is a seed that can be, that can grow. So I think it's really beautiful. Thank you. Thank you for tuning in today. Remember, you can find links to connect with our guests and access more information on the topics we discussed in the show notes. Stay engaged in your culture and continue to explore new perspectives. Join us next time for another enriching episode. Until then, keep the dialogue alive. and nurture your curiosity about the world. If you like what you hear, don't forget to subscribe and give us a review.